Hi, I'm here with another short video for you today. Today we are going to be going over how to make decorative pet collar covers. I have many different, this is the Christmas one, has little snowmen in it. Here we have an Easter one, has little chicks and little Easter eggs. A Halloween one with pumpkins and bats and stars. 4th of July, or Molly also wore this for Election Day, very patriotic. St. Patrick's Day. And then I have made many collars for Molly's covers for Molly's covers, doing the same fabric that I have made my face mask in. So when we walk, we match. She has her collar cover and I have my face mask. So I have a collar here. I wanted you to see how the cover fits on the collar. And when they wear it, Molly's a large lab, so she's a big gal. She needs a big collar cover. And this is Molly's collar that I'm going to use to demonstrate with today. So let me get something out of here that popped up on my screen. I can't see what I'm doing. And maybe it's just going to have to be there. So the first thing that I would do, I would measure my collar to see what size I need to cut my fabric. So I have just a regular tape measure that I'm going to use. I don't know if you can see that. I just can't. Okay. I don't know if you missed any of that or not because the computer was trying to do something with Apple. So here's Molly's collar. Molly has to have a pretty substantial collar that has pretty substantial clasp on it. A smaller collar, a less sturdy collar, she's going to break out of. Just because she's a very energetic dog. She's not mean. She's not wild. She just has lots of energy. And I need to be sure that she's got a collar that is sturdy enough that if I need to grab her by the collar to hold her from harm, then it's not going to break. So when I go to get my width for my collar, I'm going to measure the clasp at the widest part of the clasp. Now, it's really hard when you go to measure something, if you measure right at the end of the ruler or right at the end of the measuring tape. So I'm going to move in to my 1-inch line and I'm going to measure across. And this collar cover is 1 inch, 1 1/4, I'm going to say 1.5 inches wide. So to make the width that I would cut my fabric, I would take the 1.5 inch, double it. So now we have 3 inches. And then I would add another 1/2 inch. That would give us a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now we have the 1.5 double, 3, and then another 1/2 inch. So there's a 1/4 seam allowance on both sides. So it would be 3.5 inches wide. Now that's going to make a snug collar cover. I think probably I chose, when I cut out the fabric for today's class, I used 7 inches. And that's going to give plenty of width for the seam allowances, and also so it isn't really snug on the neck. And I'm sure because the buckle also has the width, so you have to accommodate some extra fabric for the width. So I'm going to use 7 inches of fabric, 7 wide. So here we go. I've got my 7 inches. That's also going to allow for my 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides of the collar. Now, to get the width, decide where you want your collar to extend to, from where to where. I wanted her collar to have a little bit of a pucker in it. I didn't want it just flat smooth, but I also had to accommodate for her tags because I want her tags to stick out so they're easily visible and they aren't hidden under the collar. So I went ahead and I cut this fabric. Let me go down a little bit. When I did my width, I made sure that I cut my fabric. And this fabric I cut at about 16.5 inches. So I've got 16.5. Now this would be the finished side. You have to allow also on the ends fabric for turning under your little ends so they don't ravel out. You want to hide those little ends inside of the collar. So what I did, I cut it 17 inches long. Then I turned it under once, 1/4 of an inch, and sewed it. And then I turned it under another 1/4 of an inch and sewed that down. So this side I have both. I turned it 1/4 of an inch, then I flipped it over, turned it another 1/4 of an inch. So I have no raw edges showing there. Can't find my scissors. I hate stray threads. So I have no raw edges on the end where the collar goes through. So when this is completed, I cut it 17 inches long. But by the time I turned each end over twice, now I've taken it down to a finished length of 16 inches. All right, so that would be if I was doing my cover so that it was the same on both sides. Now when I would take it to the machine, I would sew it the 1/4 of an inch all the way down. It's going to have plenty of room for the collar and the buckles to go through. Then if you decide you don't really like it that wide, you can always take and you can trim off a little bit. You can trim off a little bit here and make it a little narrower. It's kind of up to you at that point. If you have it so it's very wide, then you could also run some stitching. After you've turned your tube, you could run some stitching up and you could make it almost like a little ruffle on both sides. That would kind of be like for a girl dog. Maybe where a boy dog, maybe you wouldn't want to do those little ruffles. So I have, this would be for all one piece of fabric. I'm going to move the camera away a little to see if, there, that's better. Now you can see the entire strip of fabric. So I have a collar cover here that I took my width that I had decided on, which was 7.5 inches, or 7 inches, I'm sorry. Let's go back and measure that. And we have 7 inches. I took that, I divided it in half, which would give me 3.5 inches. So I cut 2 fabrics of different colors. We're going to make a reversible collar now. So now this is 3.5, 3.5. I've already stitched my 1/4 inch seams together. And I made it 17 inches long so that I could fold the raw edge in 1/4 and then fold it in again. And that would take 1/2 inch off of both sides. And I have made a tube. So now I'm going to turn this tube. And if you're doing a collar for a cat, say perhaps a cat's collar or a small dog, it's going to be much smaller than this. Again, the most important part would be measuring that buckle so you don't make it so narrow that the buckle can't thread through. So I'm just going to turn this tube. This would be, oh, same thing as if you were doing a pillowcase stitching. If you were doing the backing on a quilt that you did in the pillowcase style. And this just takes a few minutes. I really can't give you any helpful hints how to speed this part up, but luckily it's not very long. And so I just keep grabbing the fabric from the inside of the tube, grabbing the outside, pulling, and each time I pull, it pulls through about an inch of fabric until pretty soon we'll have the whole thing turned. Now, once you get it turned and you have your tube all ready, then I would take it to the ironing board and give it a nice press. Probably the first time you make it is the only time you need to press it. From then on, you just wash it and put it on the collar. That Christmas collar, the one with the little snowmen, that has been used many years in a row. I'll put it on just over the holiday season. And then I take it off and I launder it and I fold it and put it away for the next year. And then I pull out the next one. I can't find the Valentine's Day one. I know there's one somewhere, but I didn't find it. Okay, so now I've turned my tube and I have it nice and flat. And now is when I would take it to the iron. I would get these edges even and just press this nice and flat. Lots of times when you press like this, it will put a memory in the fabric, in the threads of the fabric, and it will always go back to that same place, especially if you steam it good, you give it a nice steam press. That's the same way they will block yarn in a sweater so the yarn pieces keep their shape. So here we have one side is red and the other side is green, totally reversible. So now we have this done, but I wanted to show you some other cool little thing you could do. Now this is just a bandana that I purchased at the dollar store, so it's not very costly. And let's say I wanted to make this a bandana style. The reds don't match. And I would simply take the bandana that already has the edges all done for you, or you could do your own and do edges, but this already has the edges done. Lay it on your collar before you have sewn it together. Decide how wide or you want it, how long you want it this way. Now this bandana is designed, it would be designed to go up on their back, not on their chest. So because of the tags, otherwise the tags on the end are going to be riding on their back. So what you would do is you would put this bandana in place on the raw edges and stitch it down on a quarter of an inch on one. And then you would take, and when you flipped it up, you're going to close it, and the raw edge from the fabric and from the bandana will go to the inside. So it's just a little trickier. You just have to kind of think it through before you get started. But that way you could put a little bandana on your collar, built-in bandana. I've seen them in the stores and I thought it was rather cute. So now we have this collar cover completed. We turned it, and see, this is a pretty substantial buckle, so I had to allow for that width of both the width and the thickness of the buckle. And I'm just going to feed this collar through, and here we go. Pull it on through, and here's the collar covered. I have a little bit of extra length in here, partly too because Molly has lost a little bit of weight. Some of you knew, some of you didn't. She was ill a while ago and she lost quite a bit of weight, and so I know she's going to be beefing up again, so I will have to lengthen the collar a little bit. I shortened it after she lost so much weight from being sick. But even if not, it's very nice. It's very attractive. And there you have a nice collar cover. Now, since this one is reversible, when you want to change it to the green, you simply spin that fabric around so that the green is going to show. Maybe you like two collars for the holiday. So, so you do it that way, and now we have it green. You could use it either way. They do get dirty as the dog wears them. You know, a dog is just like a person. There's natural oils in their fur, unless you have a poodle or a hair dog. But a fur dog has the natural oils, and a lab especially has a lot of oil in their hair. So when they're swimming, their hair doesn't absorb that water because the lab's a bird dog, a water dog. And that way, the water goes off of the fur of the dog. So you do need to launder them. So before she'll wear it for a few weeks, and then when I change the collar out to the next season, then I just pull it off again. It goes off a lot faster than it went on. And then I launder it, and then maybe I press it again at that time, or at least I finger press it down so that it's nice and flat. And then I just keep them in a corner in the drawer. And then the next season, I get out the new one, and I have this all ready to go for next year. And the dog will have a nice collar cover. So this was just kind of a fun, quick video. You could sew your stitching by hand if you don't have a sewing machine. Yes, it would take a little bit longer. I do think that machine stitching for this kind of item is a sturdier stitching. And especially if it's going on a very active dog, you probably want to make it as sturdy as you can. But if you have a cat or a small dog, you could hand stitch it and it would work out just fine. So there you go. There's this week's video. And now you know how to make a decorative dog cover dog collar cover. And again, like I said, you could make it so that your face mask and your dog's collar cover matched. So when you went walking, you would just walk in style and look very nice. So I hope you enjoy this. It's very simple to do. I'll post the instructions on the website, and it will be on the calendar so you can double check. But you just measure the length that you need it, add 1 inch. That's going to allow for the double turn on both sides. Then you'll measure the width of the buckle, because the buckle is going to be the widest part. And I feed with this in, so I measured here. And then it does have a little thickness, so I wanted to allow a little for that. So I came up with a measure of 7 inches. I think I could very easily take that measurement down to 6.5, and then it would fit more snugly against the collar, but it's okay. So right now we have the length plus 1 inch. We have the width plus half an inch. And then you're going to cut your fabric. You're going to double turn the edges so there's no raw edges on the inside. Once you have done that, you're going to fold it in two, put a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. If it's too wide, you could take it to a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That would take up a little bit more. That would take 1 inch out of that extra. And then you could cut it off, or you could just leave the extra on the inside. But that's going to make a nice snug collar cover. And once you have your sewing done, then you're going to turn it. So you're going to move it so that you can grab the fabric that's coming from the inside and pull it through. And then you pull it through until it's completely turned. Your edges are open on both sides. And then you will feed your color through. So have fun, have a matching collar and face mask with your pet. Your cat could have it. You could even do them, let's say if you had a girl dog, you wanted to look real foo-foo-y, you could take netting and you could make a nice ruffle that would go on the collar, put a little ruffle on both sides. Oh, she'd look like a little ballerina in her tutu. But so you could just have a lot of fun with this. I have an embroidery machine, so I could embroider the name right on this collar, or I could put Merry Christmas, Season's Greetings, and then she would be all decorated for the season. If you're going to do something like embroidery, you would have to do it on your piece before you have sewn it into a tube, so that when you wrote your words on there, let me bring it down. So when you wrote your words would be on the open fabric. And then when you did your tube, it could still pull through. If you've already sewn it together and you tried to put words on it, then it's just going to put the two pieces together. And then you have a nice strip that you could use for a bookmark or some other thing, but you couldn't put it on your dog's collar. So have fun with it. The directions will be posted on the website, and just have a wonderful new year. We'll see you in a next week or so on next Tuesday's block of the month for January. So join me then and have a great day. Bye-bye.